Hey guys, D.Bowie here, and this is my item build tutorial. In this episode, we're going to talk about offlane heroes in the early game. This series will focus on 3 specific things in every episode. 1. What's considered the standard starting item build or the most important thing to look out for when going for items in that lane. 2. What are the follow-up items in general, in which order did pros go for them and why? And 3. Did they make changes along the way? What were those changes and why? This video is not an easy job to tackle. There are a lot of variables, and combining concise information while being in depth is hard. For this reason, I will try to focus most of what I say toward things that are popular in this patch. So for starters, 90% of the most picked offlaners at 5k plus games are melee heroes. So in 99.9% of the time, you're going to either get stealth shield or a PMS. The key aspects of offlane starting items are always damage mitigation, regen, and mobility. So when I mention damage mitigation, my point is, let's say you always see centers going for poor man shield and tangles, and you kinda get used to it. This build is good because center has a lot of HP, and the tankiness that PMS brings to the table makes you deal more damage to the support zoning you, because you take less damage, so they take more right clicks to kill you, meaning you do more damage to them. Well, let's say you're going against a Pudge and Slardar combination. Pudge will only deal magic damage at level 1. The damage coming from Slithering Crush doesn't care about damage block, so you end up spending 500 gold in an item that doesn't help you mitigate enough damage until you get a decent amount of levels in that lane. So in a game like this, going for Stealth Shield, Ring of Protection, and 2 regen items is a way better choice. You can complete both PMS and Tranquils in the offlane while also having more regen. Some heroes like to bring Mangoes to the offlane because of their kill potential. 2 good examples are Sand King and Timbersaw. 90% of the offlaners in this meta are about predicting lane setups and having the right type of items to deal with it. The few exceptions I can think of are Darkseer, Enigma, and Batrider that don't really care so much about what they're going against. Anyways, now that we have some idea of what to look out for, let's get into this video. Before I really start talking about heroes though, there's a decent list of things you need to be aware of. Unlike the mid lane, there's way less YouTube replays available, so there's the chance I don't have footage to actually support whatever it is I'm talking about. And just wait until I have to start talking about supports. Also, offlane has more loose timings because you can either be against a favorable 1 versus 1 matchup or against the worst trial lane possible, meaning that sometimes you can end up resorting to full-time jungle with a hero that's terrible at it. There's no way you can expect amazing item timings in cases like that. Anyways, since I started talking about items, most offlaners usually want some items, but they tend to be heavily ultimate reliant heroes. Duel, Ravage, Black Hole, Stampede are just quick examples of it. That's why you get a lot of regen instead of damage items. You're more interested in experience and usually more than happy if you can get gold on top of it. Slardar is not a top tier offlaner anymore, but he is still played in the offlane sometimes. You rarely see the old Iron Talon Slardar anymore because with the new changes to leeching experience and nerfs to the item, it's just not worth going for it most of the time. I have 2 examples here. In this game against an Ursa, Riki, and Disruption combination, he decides to go for PMS. The quote-unquote tri-lane damage they provide is way more physical than magic damage related, and that physical damage is blocked by PMS, meaning that he gets more value out of it than another set of regen most of the time. At the same time, in this other game, even though Terrorblade only deals physical damage, they don't have as much control as Disruptor does, so it's really a question of surviving. Can you withstand the enemy's entire kit by going Stealth Shield? Then you should go for it. You can finish PMS in the side shop while also having more regen. Considering the item progression in a lane, a lot of people like to go Tranquils because this is what Slardars usually went for, but in the 2 examples of offlane Slardar I found, they don't go for it anymore. There are a couple of reasons to that. The first one is that with the level 10 talent, you can get the HP regen so that you have enough sustain in the mid game to farm jungle camps and etc. without going to fights low on HP. That combined with level 15 and 20 talents having a DPS aspect to it makes Slardar wanting to go for treads after the blink dagger is ready. You also see a lot of Midases now. Considering the items you want to have with the hero at 10 minutes into the game, Fly died once here and he got blink dagger at about 11 minutes after taking the tower last hit. He went PMS, Naked Boots, and Quelling Blade. Going jungle before level 6 with the hero is very underwhelming if you don't go Iron Talon, and not a lot of people like to do it anymore. In this other game that KP died more, instead of getting Quelling Blade and farming jungle, he decided to roam and fight with his team, so he went for Magic Wand and Windlace, and only after level 6 he gets a Quelling Blade to farm the jungle. At the 10-minute mark, he had half the gold for Blink Dagger. Weaver has not been picked that much after the slight nerf on bugs, so offlane Weaver was not seen so much. I only found one clip, but I guess it illustrates pretty well how you should approach debugging the offlane. The first thing you need to have in mind is that you have pretty low base damage and you want mana to cast Shukuchi and bugs in the lane, so going for the Helm of the Dominator opener is pretty good. Not only you can finish the one in the side shop very early, you get a decent amount of stats and damage. I feel like Aquila and Blightstone are core items on offlane Weaver. You don't want to be farming so much after level 6, and these two items are pretty potent in getting kills for you in the early game, while providing decent stats. One thing you need to have in mind though is that Weaver has a decent amount of farm and levels, because Fear was almost solo the entire time against a TIE Hunter. During the first levels, he was thinking about going for Boots of Speed, and this is one change-up that you can end up forced to go sometimes. If Shadow Demon ganks him with Sentry Ward before his level 7, he only needs to wait Shukuchi to be pop, commit disruption, and then there will be a decent downtime of Shukuchi that everyone will be able to hit him since he is so slow without boots. Have that in mind against lineups with a lot of disable and that brings sentries to the lane. In this game, Fear had an undeniable great performance, partly due to the lane matchup. You will rarely have that many items, but at the 10-minute mark he had Aquila, Wand, Dragonlance, Blightstone, and had pretty much half the gold for Desolator. Very impressive. Most of the time I feel like Dragonlance is the best item to go for first, even if you need to go Lycans later, because the tankiness and attack range will help you survive fights and get kills for you to transition into your Lycans a little bit later. Axe is one of those heroes that rarely or maybe never go permanent shield. The thing about Axe is that if you're against ranged heroes, having more block doesn't really help you that much because you're not doing any damage to them. You're probably better off jungling in that case, and against melee cores, no one can stop you with the exception of maybe Ursa and Monkey King. Also, a lot of heroes in the offlane that go for PMS either have a damage increase skill like Underlord or Slard or F level 6, or they are just good right clickers like Legion or Magnus. X doesn't benefit a lot from PMS. Pretty much the only opener I have seen from offlane X's is a very heavy on regen starting item build. 2 tangles, salve and stealth. Sometimes you will see a ring of protection in there instead of a set of tangles to finish tranquils in the side shop. There are games that you shouldn't go tranquils though. In this game for instance, he's against a lot of burst physical damage. The Monkey King support had a good run, and on top of that they have a Clinks. So in a game he didn't have a best start, against 2 invisible heroes and a Monkey King roaming on his ass, there's no way he can use the Tranquils to farm the jungle after the laning phase without dying, especially because Bounty and Monkey King are supports. They can and they will look for you in the jungle, even at the beginning of the game. I really like this change-up. In this other game we see yet another change. It's kind of a next level change-up though, so X has the level 15 talent that gives him more damage, and some people did experiment with going treads on X. I feel like it can be decent, but in this game Furev was against the worst matchup possible, so that's probably why he struggled so much with the item. Treads has some decent benefits. X struggles with mana, so Tread Switch is okay. Having 8 extra strength is pretty good on X, and on top of that, you have a decent amount of nukes coming from the enemy team. Charge, Shuriken, Sunstrike, so if he went Tranquils, he was going to suffer a little bit. So Treads is kind of a middle ground between Tranquils and Vanguard. If you don't want your Blink Dagger so late, but you need tankiness, you can go for it. But it can be underwhelming, especially if you don't Tread Switch in fights, and you can't get kills because the benefits of both Vanguard and Tranquil boots is exactly having sustain to farm the jungle and get blink. Center is now one of the top tier picks in this meta. He's very similar to Axe in item build. He likes to go Tranquil Boots and Blink Dagger, and the starting item build doesn't change too much. Unlike X though, PMS is pretty decent on Centaur. Since his passive doesn't farm the jungle as fast as X and also spends HP using his second skill to farm the jungle, the sustain that PMS gives him is pretty decent, especially considering X already has more base HP regen than Centaur. Also, since return works regardless of an enemy hero being close to you, means that any type of damage block, especially early on, make a lot of difference in zoning supports. Fly for instance went for the Stealth, Shield, Ring of Protection, Tangles, and Self in this game. A less greedy build because not only he's against a Lich that will force him to be very far away from his tower, he's also against Lone Druid. So his best bet here is stay in the lane as much as he possibly can, and then use the Self and Shrine to farm the jungle as he rotates back to base to go back again to the lane. I also like that he goes for PMS before going jungle. He really understands how to make use of the hero. Centaur's items are all over the place. In this game, Fly hushed a Hood as his first item. It's undeniable that there's a huge amount of magic damage in the enemy team, and sometimes providing initiation, but dying every single time after doing that's not worth being a relevant force in the late game. Sniper and Spectre are 2 heroes that take a while before they really want to fight, meaning that if Centaur starts going for kills against mobile heroes like Amber and Morph, he would maybe get a few kills but be useless later on. It can be good to wait your allies' power spikes. Also, Centaur is a hero that can help his allies even if he's just farming, so not going Blink isn't necessarily bad if you're using your ult accordingly. If unlike the game I just showed you, you can stay in the lane, going for a Quelling Blade can help you ramp up your farm a little bit. Some centers like to go Magic Stick, and I really want to praise us for in this clip, so take a look. He only buys his Magic Stick after level 6. If you take a look at center's mana pool at level 6, you can ult and stun, but you won't have enough mana for another stun. You need like 60 mana. If you're going on summon though, there's a decent chance you can get like 4 1 charges, have enough mana to finish the job. And in this case, he indeed got a kill, but fortunately the shrine was working when he ults, and he guarantees a little bit of mana regardless. But I mean, he only buys it when he's level 6 and he knows he's gonna have the opportunity to stun twice, so I just really like what he did here. In this game he was going Blink, and around the 11-minute mark had Tranquil's Quelling Blade, PMS and Magic Stick. In the Zoldyr S4 game we see another change-up. I feel like he didn't went for a Magic Stick in this scenario because against the Disruptor it's going to be very unlikely that he manages to ult, stun someone, and then stun someone again without Disruptor glimpsing him back. So he goes for Raindrops. Pretty decent mana regen while also dealing with some of the magic damage from the Radiant team. In this game he also had a Blink at around that time. Legion Commander is a very decent hero against some matchups. He has decent base damage, move speed, attack animation, can farm the jungle if zoned out of the offlane. In this Arteezy game, he's probably against only one hero, since Bounty Hunter will be roaming, but that one hero is a Cotto. Poor Man's Shield would be terrible here, even though it works decently well against Void. What he needs is regen and a lot of awareness so that he doesn't take a lot of Illuminates during the laning phase. Now, in this other game, S4 is also against a Cotto and went for Poor Man's Shield. The thing about Cotto is that he's really good playing aggressively in the Radiant offlane or defensively in the Dire safe lane, but not so good when he's on the other side. So good players almost always will abuse the Radiant side Cotto in the offlane, and he feels safer going for PMS. This is what Cotto did. Not only it's very likely he'll be against a dual lane, he won't be dealing with a ton of magic damage. In this other game, the SAJ goes for a very different build. I feel like this one is mostly because he had an IO in his team. Pay attention how he already has a plan in his mind. Pro players almost never learn a skill first, but in this case he already has overwhelming odds learned. What he wanted here is to get an early first blood, so if he finds an enemy heroes, the move speed of Tether and overwhelming odds should be enough for Legion to reach a target, and then after he applies Orb of Venom, they can chase it down, hopefully. They don't find it here, but I feel like the Orb of Venom is also a way of dealing with Ursa. He would be able to kite him a little bit, especially with the move speed from overwhelming odds as well. And at level 2 he can even purge Earthshock, so it's a decent laner against Ursa. He can be killed, but he's one of the melee heroes that can actually deal with Ursa a little bit. In the end though, he was against a safe lane Slardar. Still, Orb of Venom is pretty decent in that matchup as well. When we talk about follow-up items on Legion, things can vary greatly. The most common item seems to be Phase Boots. You do rely a lot on overwhelming odds when you're playing offlane, and having the potential of engaging and disengaging with the move speed bonus from Phase Boots is very good. Especially because offlane region rarely farms an initiation item fast enough, so Phase Boots really helps in that regard, or else you're going to be useless for 15 minutes into the game, and that's terrible for Legion since you want to get duels as often as possible, as early as possible as well. So as I was saying, Phase Boots is usually the first item to go for, and you sometimes will see a Quelling Blade before Phase Boots. In lanes Legion feels safe getting less hits. Afterwards though, there's a lot of deviation, as 4 goes for Wand into Blink Dagger. They have Lifestealer, so Blink is fairly good. The follow-up from Sniper is a good incentive as well. Arteezy goes for Mordihian. The enemy team doesn't have a lot of damage over time, and they have huge bursts of damage like Illuminate, Shuriken, Lightning Bolt, meaning that armlet toggling is great, especially if you're Arteezy. Most of the time he's also be able to pop Mordihian before Chrono is activated, and sometimes it can help him survive the burst of damage coming from Void. Blink would be good as well, since he can dodge Chrono and all that, but I'm pretty sure he will die most of the times he initiated with Duel because the enemy team has a lot of follow-up while his team doesn't have that much. Armlet is a decent item on any midi core as well. Please guys, don't go Armlet on Timbersaw. In this game, Amber can be the initiator, allowing Arteezy to follow up with overwhelming odds, Phase Boots, and Duel on the Searing Chains target. The SAJ goes for a very different build. He goes for Phase Boot, but also Orb of Venom and Blightstone to abuse the fact that Slardar is a melee hero that doesn't have a lot of regen, so he can trade hits decently, especially since he is against a dual lane. He goes for Shadow Blade this game, a decent item. Radiant has a lot of counter initiation. Necro ult, Ursa ult, being the one initiating fights with Blink Dagger is suicide, and at the same time Mordihian doesn't work particularly well against Venomancer, so I really like the pickup. Well, what a surprise, another melee hero. Nyx was never an unheard pick in the offlane, but with so many Invokers, Storms, Warlocks, and Cottos in Star Series, he was banned a lot of times. The hero loves to go PMS because not only it guarantees him a way to deal with support harass, it also gives him damage in the lane, since believe it or not, Nyx is an agility hero. The starting items vary depending on how strong you think the enemy offlane is. In this S4 game, it's pretty clear that Tusk and Kunkka will roam, especially when you consider they have a jungle Enigma, so he goes for the greedier starting item build. Saves the skill point in case someone goes on him, but in a 1 vs 1 his item build works very well, especially against the harass from the boars. In this might control game we see him going for a more conservative build, with tons of regen. He's against a decent amount of magic damage, so no reason to go for PMS right away, but as you can see he already kills PMS and Quelling Blade because later on Earth Spirit will rotate and he can get some less hits. After all, he doesn't jungle particularly well, so every last hit in the lane is very important for a Nyx. Syndrine goes for a middle ground build. Even though he only gets one regen item, he has more stats and part of the PMS components. In this game he has a Treant in the offlane with him, so he would rather have more attack and mana to get kills than just surviving. Talking about follow-up items, it feels like Quelling Blade is a very common grab after PMS, followed by Boots and then Magic Stick. A lot of players either start with Mangoes or they bring one. After that we see Arcanes, and this is usually the items you're going to have. Sumail went for an Iron Talon in this game since he struggled so much. It's probably one of the only ways to jungle with Nyx, but he went Arcanes afterwards. Sand King is the king of melee matchups. He can deal with ranged heroes, but he truly shines when he's against a melee core. Sand King doesn't really care about PMS. The initial items for him tend to be very defined. This is one of the most common starting item builds people go for. A good mix of regen, mana burst in case he needs to get kills or run away, and Fairy Fire for the extra pop of HP, since Sand King usually gets involved in kills, even solo, fairly early into the game, when you compare him to other offlaners. We see two different sets of items being purchased by Sand Kings in these examples, and I can't just talk about them without mentioning the skill build. When Sonico goes for his Tranquils into Soul Ring build, first you need to understand that he was against a melee core. This means he gets more points in Caustic Finale, while Ohio had points in Sandstorm since Caustic Finale isn't so great against Quap. With those points he can be aggressive in the early game, and Tranquil Boots gives him the move speed to do so. While if Ohio went for the same item build, he wouldn't find so much success since he doesn't have that burst damage. So Nico was able to finish his Blink Dagger at the 10-minute mark since he got so much out of his lane. After all, he was against a very weak core hero, Lark. Ohio finishes his Blink a little bit later. He also went for a Magic Stick and Raindrops. Pretty good items against Visage, Tinker and Quap. If there's one hero in this game that likes mangoes and starts with them, this hero is Timbersaw. What usually feels like you running away from the supports can easily become you having the opportunity to kill them, especially if they are strength heroes. This is the most common and all-around build. Stealth Shield, Salve, Tangle and a Mango. We have another change-up. In this game he has only one regen item. If you look at the draft, there's no doubt dual lanes will ensue and maybe someone is even jungling. He gets the best matchup possible in the end. Legion will have a hard time zoning Timbersaw in the early levels, and Timber doesn't kill Legion so fast either, so he decides to get Quelling Blade and trade farm, which works fairly well. Considering follow-up items, we see some Timbersaws going for PMS, but it's kinda rare. PMS loses its value rapidly, and you might as well spend that gold in other stuff. Since in this game there was an Ursa in the enemy team, he decided to go for PMS, especially because he was forced to not get another level of the passive at level 3, making him not as strong. As you get more reactive armor levels, you don't really need PMS most of the time. Quelling Blade is also a decent item to get more less hits in lane, but against Monkey King in this game, Timbersaw couldn't really farm with right clicks, so he ignores the item. Arcanes and Magic Wand seems to be core, with Soul Ring following afterwards. At around the 10-minute mark, you should have Arcanes, Stealth Shield, Soul Ring, Wand, and maybe a Raindrops, with some gold for one of your next Bloodstone items. You're rarely going to see an Underlord that starts with another set of items that it's not PMS and Tangles. This was super good before, because your passive was the skill you wanted to get at level 1 always, because it synergized really well with attack speed and damage reduction. You could right-click supports very reliably and take them out of the lane if you get some damage from the creeps that were dying. Nowadays, if you're against a very strong tri-lane, it can be better to just get Firestorm, because 4% damage reduction is very little, and even though you get the damage, if you're dying to them every time, it just doesn't matter. While some people change the first skill point you get at level 1, the build pretty much is the same. I feel like you can get more regen on him and finish PMS in the side shop, but most of the time you're better off using your shrine and coming back with full mana, because the strength of him is overpowering enemies with both mana and your bulkiness. You're better off farming the jungle with your PMS and going back to the tower than just having one set of regen in your inventory. The item progression is very straightforward. Usually you see Quelling Blade and Boots right away, followed by Arcanes, Raindrops, and Mech. It is possible to finish back before the 10-minute mark, but you need to be having an okay game at least. Guys, just another reminder, I will be streaming every qualifier game I possibly can starting Monday. Tune in my stream to support me and win some random items. Well, this wraps up for today. If you enjoyed this video, please guys, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see the extended version of this video, please check the link in the description. Pugna is a platform where you can learn from people like Chessie, Fogged, Monib, and get better at the game. They have great content on the new patch, and if you want to raise our MMR, this is a great time. Just figure out the patch faster than others and get those easy wins. Two pretty distinct paths you can go for. One is the old school, Arcane Boots Magnus. It's not so popular anymore, but if you're playing against a ranged hero that can zone you too hard, it's usually better to go towards that path, or else you're either going to die when farming, or not farm enough to make the Echo Saber build viable. This build usually starts with Stealth Shield and Quelling Blade. If you're going for the Echo Saber build, sometimes you can see Poor Man's Shield because the agility helps you farm the jungle faster, followed by Bottle, Woods, Wand, and Raindrops. The order is very game dependent, followed by Arcanes and Blink. In a good game, you should have all of these at about